Welcome to this video tutorial on how to create a laser cutting file from a 3D terrain model in Rhino. In this video I've created a simple terrain model which consists of a topography and a few excavations which we're going to be using to flatten and turn into a waffle shaped grid that we can use to create a laser cutting file for this terrain. To start with, I'm going to begin by scaling my terrain to be the size of the physical model I want to make. At the moment, this terrain is exactly 100 meters long, and I've modeled it accurately to the real size of the project I'm working on. For my physical model, I want this to be at a 1:100 scale, so I'm going to scale this down by 0.01, so it's 1/100th of the original size. To do this, I'm going to select the model, go to my Scale tool, hit Enter to choose the base point to scale from, and we're going to scale it by 0.01. Hitting Enter, that will then scale it down to a 1:100 scale version of this model. To zoom in on this, I'm then going to select the model and click on the Zoom Selected option to zoom back into my model. And I'm just going to check the dimensions using the Polyline tool along the edge, and you can see here that this is now 1000 millimeters, so it's 1 meter long, and it used to be 100 meters, so it's 1/100th of that size now. Now we're going to start by cutting this up into a series of cross sections that we're going to be using for our laser cut file. To do this, I'm going to use the contour command. I'm going to select the model, type in contour into my command line, select that contour tool, and for the base point I'm just going to pick one corner of my model, and for the direction perpendicular I'm going to choose the opposite corner to the right to allow my contours to cut from this direction. With that selected, I'm then going to choose the distance between my contours, and for this model I want this to be 100 millimeters, so I'm going to type in 100 here, and then I'm going to hit Enter. With that, it will then chop my model up into a series of contour lines. With these lines selected and my waffle kind of layer selected here, I'm then going to extrude these lines to represent the size of the pieces of card I'm going to be using to construct my physical model. For this model I'm going to be using 5mm thickness of cardboard to make these cross sections. So for this I'm going to type in extrude. We're going to use the extrude curve command, and we're going to extrude this by 5mm by typing in 5 into the command line and hitting Enter. This then creates the first part of our waffle. I'm now going to repeat this process by selecting my original poly surface, using the contour command, and we're going to do this in the opposite direction by picking that first point again, picking the opposite corner to the left hand side, and again choosing a distance of 100 millimeters to cut the cross sections up. With this, we're then going to extrude these cross sections also by 5mm. This has now created my waffle shaped structure, which is essentially going to act as my template for my laser cutting file. We can now turn off the original terrain, and you can see now we've got this waffle structure. Now when I cut this out of my cardboard material, I want to make sure these pieces slot into one another. So I'm going to have to cut out little slots for each of these so they can wedge in and create this terrain in a physical model form. To do this, I'm just going to make a new layer, which I've called slots here, and we're going to be creating pieces to essentially remove them from the model and cut out our particular slots in the base of all of these pieces. To start this, I'm just going to use the polyline, and we want to first divide my model up so I know exactly where I want these slots to be. I'm going to do this by selecting the midpoint of my first waffle, and I'm going to draw a line to the midpoint of the last waffle here. With that line then selected, I'm just going to move it away from the surface of my model, and I'm going to divide that line into a series of points using the divide command. For this, I know I've got 10 segments, so I'm going to divide it by 10, and I'm just going to hit Enter there. I'm then going to repeat this step just by drawing out a line on the other side, so we've got a division on both sides of our model. So we're going to do it midpoint to midpoint again, take my curve, move it away from my model, and then divide this by 10, like so. With this now selected, I'm now going to create a shape that I'm going to use the Boolean difference tool to remove it from my grid. I'm going to use the box tool for this, and we're going to use the 3-point box tool to construct a box which we're going to remove to create our slot shapes. So I'm going to start with this point here, and I'm going to draw out my box But instead of just doing it 5mm, which is the width of my card, I'm going to do it a little bit wider. The reason for this is whenever we're making physical models, we want to give a little bit of tolerance to the things we make. It's good to make these shapes a little bit bigger than we need to, so when the pieces slot in, we know they fit. If we make it too tight, we're going to have to recut them by hand, and it takes a long time. So because I'm using a 5mm thickness of card, I'm going to make the slots that I want to kind of slot these in 7mm wide, so they're 2mm bigger. And this will give us a little bit of tolerance for when we slot it together. So we're going to do 7 here on the width, and then we're just going to draw that box to be much longer than my piece. For the height, I don't want it too close to the top of this, so I'm just going to choose roughly the midpoint of this piece here, like so. So it sits in the middle. I'm then going to realign the middle of this box, just using the move tool to the middle of my point there, so it sits just in the middle here. We're then going to take that box, and I'm just going to copy it along here. You can use the array tool to do this, or once you've copied one, you can click yes to all these options up here, and it will remember the distance and direction you're copying it from, and you can just copy it along the line, like so. So there we've got our first slots to cut out. Now, with these made, we can then select all of our geometry pieces here, and we can remove these pieces from that geometry. Now there's one cutout we don't need to do this to, and this is this last one here. If you notice in my grid, it actually sits at the very end of the piece, and so does this one there. So we don't actually need to cut things out because it's going to act as the end cap to our model. So I'm just going to select these first pieces here. We're then going to go to the Boolean difference tool, and we're going to select all my purple cutout pieces and hit enter, like so. This will then chop them out from the base of the model, and as you can see here, if we take one and then just lift it out from the piece, we've now created our slots to allow it to slot in. Now we need to repeat this process for the other side of the model, and this is exactly the same as the previous one. To start with though, I'm going to move my points here up to the top of my first slot because we want to create the other slot to align perfectly to that top piece. So I'm going to use the move tool, lock it in the vertical motion, and we'll just align it to the top of that piece, like so. Now I'm going to use exactly the same process to create these slots, and I'm going to just fast forward the video to do this. Now this has been completed, you can see that on my sections here we've got slots that cut out this way, and on my pieces the other way we have slots that cut the opposite way. And this will allow us to essentially slot the models in to one another, and you can kind of see if I zoom in that these now slot in like so. So now we've essentially created our waffle structure. The last thing we need to do is flatten this out into our laser cut outlines. To do this, I'm going to use the Extract Faces tool to extract faces for each of these shapes. So we can use that by typing in Extract Surface into the command line, like so. We can pick the surfaces we want, and I'm going to do this one axis at a time. So we're going to do each of the surfaces this way first, and I'm just clicking on those front facing faces to pick out one for each piece, like so. We're going to hit enter to extract them, and we're just going to move them away from my model. With this, I'm then going to rotate them using that x-axis on my gumball and holding the shift key to rotate them upwards, and I'm then going to lay them out just by using the control key to deselect a face, and then we're just going to move them along in order. So we're sort of laying them out one at a time in order from right to left, like so. This allows me just to keep control of the order of these pieces, which is important when we come to reconstruct this model as a physical piece. So I'm just moving them from left to right, deselecting each face as I go, like so. With that now placed, and just make sure you don't have too much overlap, so we're just going to separate these ones out if they're overlapping slightly, just like so. We're then going to take these and type in SetPt to flatten these down. So we're using the set point command. We're going to set it to the Z axis and hit OK, and this flattens these points out. Again, we're just going to make sure that none of them are touching. And then with these, we're then going to select all of them, and with my cut layer selected, we're going to use the duplicate border, so DupBorder command here, to essentially create an outline of each of these pieces, and that creates our cutout file that we can then use to laser cut these pieces out. I'm now going to also repeat that process for the other side to complete this file. So there you can see now I have both the edges for both sides of my waffle file. Now at this point you may want to label these to keep track of all these pieces and how they slot together, and then you may want to also nest them so they can be arranged in a neat way that fits onto the pieces that you're laser cutting. But that was just a quick video tutorial on how you can take a terrain model, slice it up into a waffle shaped grid, and then use this grid to create a laser cutting file to turn that digital model into a physical 3D piece. I hope you found this video tutorial useful, and if you want to watch any other videos on modeling, rendering and creating drawings in Rhino, then please do check out the channel. Thanks for watching.